Tyler Adler, he's the owner of the company Risk Reduction Plus Group Smart Fence Products. He's also a certified floodplain manager, and he is a licensed insurance agent. We have also with us our CRS coordinator, Kathy Shaw, for the borough. And my name is Steve Winters. I am the construction official and floodplain administrator. And I also am a certified floodplain manager. I'd like to welcome the mayor. And actually, Joe from the county had stopped by with some gifts for us. So we appreciate that.
It's Joe Barris from the, I just want to say, Joe Barris from Monmouth County CRS program with the County Office of Plan. Yes. Our partner.
Very important partner for us. So, do you want to start with some of your stuff? So basically what we're going to do is, so you can bounce any questions you want off of Tyler and I. We can answer any certified floodplain manager questions, building code related technical issues you can ask me, or Tyler, insurance related questions you may have for flood insurance or products. Tyler's a great person to bounce things off of. And our goal here really is to get out the word. As you may or may not know, Highlands is not a CRS rated community currently. With the support of the mayor and the council, their goal was to get the community rated so we can get some savings to the insurance, to the residents of the town through their insurance rates. And Tyler will talk more about that. My goal is to enforce the building codes. A lot of the building codes since 2015 has changed. A lot of this stuff used to, these code compliance issues used to be optional. They are now all mandatory. So for example, if you decide to build a deck or you decide to do an addition, all of this costs money. And while we're trying to save you money, the floodplain regulations adds a lot of costs to that. So the more you know, the better off you would be. Not only saves you insurance rates, it also saves you in the costs of building. And because the Borough of Highlands now really is pushing to get these, to get this community rated, along with that comes a lot of responsibilities that we have to comply with through the FEMA regulations. So with that, let me first open, would you like to introduce yourself, give yourself some background information?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like Steve said, my name is Tyler Ardren. I am the Vice President of Risk Reduction Plus Group, where we specialize in flood insurance. I am a licensed insurance broker, as well as a certified floodplain manager. Been doing this now for going on 13 years, solely flood. And then with me is our mitigation specialist with one of our partner companies, floodproofing.com. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Owen Ganther. I'm also a certified floodplain manager. I've been working with Tyler for about 11 years now. Been with floodproofing.com for about 10. My role with floodproofing.com, I cover New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, and I educate architects, engineers, general contractors on flood code, FEMA requirements, ASC 24 requirements, but also the building application for a lot of these flood mitigation systems. So one of the ways that Tyler and I work together, he specializes with obviously the flood insurance aspect, but when it comes to the application, I can assist with what products would be applicable for your specific project or your specific building.
And Kathy, you want to give yourself some background? Kathy Shore is the CRS coordinator. It's the second side of floodplain management. So my responsibility is to manage the floodplain regulations. Kathy's responsibility is to get us rated and keep us rated. And that is a very complicated task. You want to?
Yeah, I'm kind of a flash from Highlands Pass. There's a few people here that remember me from years ago. And I did work to develop a flood mitigation plan for Highlands in the late 90s. And we also wrote the first grant to elevate any home in New Jersey was in Highlands. And it was in the late 90s. And we also were certified back then for CRS. But times change, regulations change, several flood maps, Hurricane Sandy, a lot of changes in New Jersey, a lot of challenges. So when I I am a consultant. I have an economic development background. I'm recently retired from Middlesex County. I was department head for business development and education. And I've created special improvement districts and worked with redevelopment areas throughout New Jersey. And Highlands has always been, I just have to share this, special to me because it just has always had unique geography that I could not understand the difference between Highlands and Sausalito. My dad lives near Sausalito, and I'm like, it looks the same. We just need to, bring it together. And I mean, I think New Jersey is a very challenging state. We can all say with our regulations and our rules. But I just wanted to say that we've developed in partnership with our floodplain administrator, which is Stephen Winters, and his construction official, puts those two things together, a floodplain development review process, which was something that we needed. FEMA Region 2 wrote to the mayor and the governing body and said, you've got to have a floodplain review process. So we've developed one. I know it's new for people, it's somewhat painful that there's a process, but it's what we need to do to be able to comply and grow and in the future to be resilient, for Highlands to be resilient. I think everybody wants that with the property that they own. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm kind of the details lady.
Okay, so with that, we can open the floor to questions. Yes, just maybe start with your name.
My name is Andrew Stockton. I'm a resident in town. I'm also a professional engineer at Lancer here too. And I've dealt with hundreds of house liftings since Hurricane Sandy.
Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. And maybe since Kathy just gave her summary right there, I'll start with this one. In a couple of weeks from now, NJDP is going to propose new rules for the flood hazard areas, requiring homes to be set base flood plus 5 feet. And typically it's base flood plus 1 that we've been living with since Hurricane Sandy. How is that going to impact everything that's been done and everything that we're going to need to do if that rule ever gets passed or brought into regulation?
Yeah, I'll start off and you guys can jump in whenever you want. Those are inland rules, and honestly, there's still a lot.
For the tidal flood hazard area.
Yeah,
Base
basically.
flood plus 5.
Yeah, so until the borough doesn't enforce the rules until the ordinance requires the enforcement of the rules. So there's still a lot of training that needs to go on. The state really they come out with the regulations, but it's not as easy to say, well, we're now, instead of a 1 foot freeboard base plus the 1 foot, now we're gonna do base plus 5 foot.
You've
that
heard that happening.
right. It's not that easy because
But that might impact the community rating system too.
it might, and that's something that we're working on. So there's a lot of questions that have been put forth by floodplain managers that have not yet been answered on how they're gonna introduce this or how they're going to enforce it. For example, you have a house that's on a 0 lot line, and you're gonna add another 5 foot to this house.
Right.
How are you gonna get to the second floor? It's not physically possible.
You're going to cause height variances and everything else with a rule like that. It just, to me, it seems overly burdensome with what we've already been dealing with since Hurricane Sandy.
That's right. So as far as we're concerned right now, we're enforcing the current regulations that are in place now. The effective and the preliminary maps, and the base plus 1 foot freeboard. That's what we're enforcing.
I've also heard from FEMA that they're never going to adopt the preliminary map. So why do we keep referring to the preliminary map, and why not just refer to our promulgated map?
Because we're required to use the most stringent map. So we have maps, there are some maps that are, depending on whether they're preliminary, you have some preliminary maps that are more stringent than your effective maps.
They're never going to get adopted by FEMA.
But,
Not going to happen.
well, whether it's adopted or not, under the International Building Code and the Uniform Construction Code, we're required, as you know as an engineer, to use the most restrictive of the rules for the floodplain. So, for example, if your base flood elevation on your preliminary maps are 8 foot and your effectives have 9 foot, we're going with the 9 feet.
I understand that part, but what I'm saying is, if the preliminary map is say 13 feet and the base flood is elevation 11 feet, why pay attention to the preliminary map? Because it's never gonna be adopted or promulgated, it's gonna be the official map that is the controlling document.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is you mentioned official map. You can jump in any time here. The term official map doesn't mean anything because the official map, the adopted map, sometimes is the less stringent map. So I can't go by the official map. I would have to go by the older map. So for example, in another town I work in, are you familiar with the Limbaugh lines, the coastal A's?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the newer map, there is no Limbaugh line. And base flood is lower. In the old map, there is a Limbaugh line, and the house actually sits in a coastal lake. So what regulation do you think I enforced? It was the coastal lake. It was the old map.
Yeah.
And their engineer brought up the same thing and said, look, you can look up any FEMA book you want. It's the most stringent, period. That's just the reality. There's a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, you have towns in New Jersey that aren't even enforcing these regulations, right? I'm not gonna mention municipalities, but you can imagine, you have whole business districts, right? We're faced with this on Bay Street. You have a business district, these are AE zones. Residential homes cannot be non-residential homes cannot be wet floodproof, they gotta be dry floodproof. On Bay Avenue, your average height for, at your design flood elevation is 6 feet above your grade.
6 or 7.
You are not dry floodproofing a 6-foot building in, they're just not built to that. You would need, there's only one type of construction that would withstand that kind of hydrostatic pressure, and that is a concrete steel reinforced wall. You're not getting it out of a block wall, and you're certainly not getting it out of a wood wall. So how do you handle that?
That's the main reason why I'm here tonight too, is that exact same issue, and it affects basically all of our businesses on Bay Avenue.
Yeah, and we have quite a few now that are in the pipeline that are faced with that. We have a couple of projects that are completely stalled because we made it clear to these projects, look, your choice is this, you raise the house on a concrete wall, reinforced steel, then you can dry floodproof it. Otherwise, it's a garage downstairs, it's storage, you're not using it for anything. It's very unfortunate. These are things that should have been planned by the architects and engineers, so it's good to see people like you here. Unfortunately, I think even with Sandy regulations being 12, 13, 14 years ago, the construction officials and the engineers are slow to catch up. Now, the regulations became mandatory in 2015, where these FEMA regs were now tied to the building codes. And still, there are still towns that are saying, we're not doing it. We're not telling our businesses, the business community, to enforce the regs. So that's a political decision, right? Because you don't enforce the regs, okay, that's fine, but then you're not gonna get the discounts. But you also have the building component. Because if that building becomes a substantially damaged building, Highlands fortunately is 50%. Mama Beach, I have 40%. Right? You hit 40%. Do you know how easy it is to hit 40%? You may have a $2 million home on the waterfront, but FEMA doesn't consider $2 million. Your improvement value on that house is probably $300,000. You know, you hit 50%. You know, that's $150,000. You're substantially improved. You're raising that house.
Can you talk more about the 50% and what exactly counts towards that 50%?
Sure. So if you go onto our website, there's a lot of information that, actually the floodplain development permit that we created has information on, I think it's the second page, about what things can be excluded. That's where you start. Don't start with what has to be included, because everything has to be included except those items that are excluded. Dumpsters, pools, some fences, flag poles, landscaping, professional plans. There's a list of items that you do not include in that substantial improvement. You leave them out.
Is it up to the property owner or the applicant for a floodplain permit to get an appraiser involved? Or are you the final determinant in that?
I am the final determinant, but what I do is, we have one property that did it. Their property was assessed at $110,000. I said, look, that's the tax record, that's what I'm going off of. But I will tell you that FEMA allows 4 different avenues to choose, one of which is a reassessment of the improved value. You have to find an assessor that knows that, because a lot of them, you can also do some sort of hybrid cash value, you can't do a total value of the property, because if you come back and say the property's 1.5 million, I can't accept that.
It's the improvement, the structure.
Yeah, so I can tell you, we did have a property that went from 110 to 440, and I accepted that. That was a legitimate, bona fide licensed appraiser, and I'm not gonna question the appraiser, I'm not here to hurt the townspeople. If you get a licensed appraiser that says, look, this property is legitimately worth the approved value, 300,000, I will accept that. And that'll give you some wiggle way. The problem is though, for him, he may or may not reach that value, because 50% for him would be the 220. He's close to it now. And if he doesn't hit the 220, he's gonna know that anything that happens, so much as a replacement of an air conditioner, he's gonna wind up raising the house. And and you have to understand, these laws are punitive, period. The goal is to get the houses raised and out of the floodplain in any way possible. Because the idea of constantly paying for the repairs and maintenance of these buildings will never end, as long as they're in a floodplain, and it's assumed that the floods are only gonna get worse. So the idea is to comply today, get them above the floodplain, and not have to deal with the issues you're gonna have to face in the future. So now, let's say, for example, you decided, you know what, I'm gonna go with the value, I'm just gonna cut my cost of construction, I'm gonna keep it under 50%. And now the state of New Jersey decides to come up with some very stringent rules in the future. And your house now is not compliant with the new rules, it's compliant with the old rules. And I've had one house like this, where the guy decided not to raise the house, cut his house 1 foot short, so he complied with the old maps. The maps changed, which were recent changes, he's now 1 foot below the BFE. He wants to do an addition, guess what happened to him? Substantial damage, and we're 40% on a beach. Needless to say, his wife said there ain't no way we're paying that money, we're not raising the house. They just paid 60 grand to raise the house, now they gotta raise it again, it's a non-compliant house. So now they can't do anything. 40% of the value of the house was $120,000. Trying to build an addition for $120,000 and not hitting that substantial improvement goal.
Can we talk a little bit about wet proofing or dry proofing for the businesses in town?
Sure, you want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Remember slides? Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to go through.
Yeah, sure.
Slide.
We have slides dedicated to.
Yeah, visual is the best thing with wet flood proofing. Just remember, the basic difference between wet flood proofing and dry flood proofing. Wet flood proofing, the water's allowed into the house.
Right.
Dry, it's not allowed. And the building code only allows 4 inches within a 24-hour period, which means it assumes that there's gonna be leaks, so you're gonna have a way to get that water out in a 24-hour period, which means a backup generator or batteries.
So for the commercial properties on Bay Avenue, at around elevation 4, at the pavement grade around elevation 11 or 12, base flood plus 1, they would have to dry proof 7 or 8 feet, and FEMA's
A foot above base, a foot above the flood.
So, talking about dry proofing 8 feet, at least 8 feet.
No, if your base flood is, so some areas are 4 feet, if you're 4 feet, you're gonna dry flood proof to 5 feet.
Most of Bay Avenue is around elevation 4 or elevation 5.
So, yeah, closer to the,
Right.
so further north, it's closer to 6, depending on where the grade is.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is FEMA's technical guidelines say dry proofing is really only valid to about 4 feet when we have to dry proof to 8 feet.
They do say that, but there's a qualifier, and
That's what-
if you read it
that's what-
closely, right, they say it can be, but I'm assuming that you're assuming that the walls can be hydrostatically, that can hydrostatically hold that pressure. Yeah, that's a big assumption. Again, you're over 3 feet, you're talking concrete, steel reinforced walls. You're not getting anything, that's gonna,
But we're also talking about on Bay Avenue, some buildings are more than 100 years old that aren't built that way. So
And
what do we do? That's why we're here.
that's exactly what we're faced with now.
Yeah.
You can't do anything. If you're gonna exceed the 50%, you're gonna have to raise the house.
That's gonna kill businesses in town.
Well, maybe not. And they say that, but there's, you know, there's ways around it.
That's what we're here trying to find.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone's got it.
Yeah, I mean, so Steve just hit on the wet floodproofing portion. The foundation flood vents is what we refer to as wet floodproofing. It allows water to flow in and out to equalize hydrostatic pressure, but that's going to be used for your residential applications for the most part. You know, this isn't going to be something that's really going to be applicable for your commercial structures on Bay Avenue, because that first floor is habitable space, right? So we don't want water in habitable spaces. But those foundation flood vents for residential applications like we see here, for non-habitable spaces. But dry floodproofing, there are a number of different applications. It's really just going to be dependent upon the structure itself, all right? So as Steve mentioned before, you know, with these solutions, we really need structurally reinforced CMU block, poured concrete, you know, steel framed, whatever it may be that will hold the structure in place during a flood event, but also keep the water out. But as Steve mentioned before, you know, we have these guidelines. So obviously, you know, here in the Highlands, you have your local floodplain ordinances, but what we refer to as FEMA Technical Bulletin 3 is your minimum criteria that you need to abide by. All right, so the goal is to make the building watertight, substantially impermeable. NFIP allows dry floodproofing in non-residential structures only, and only acceptable in A zones. All right, so you can't dry floodproof in a B zone unless you get some sort of ordinance. But it's not just keeping the water out, and I think this is the big thing that Steve was probably hitting towards as well, because we have this ASCE 7 document. It also refers to debris impact, because when you have floodwater heights of 3-4 feet, it's not just water. You have debris floating around, and these systems need to withstand. Yeah, absolutely. Cars can begin floating with 12 to 16 inches of just water. All right. So FEMA has identified dry floodproofing solutions should withstand impact from a minimum weight of 500 to 1,000 pounds. All right. So this is something, you know, when I talk to GC, sometimes they'll just say, "I'm just going to make my own panel." Yeah, it doesn't really work like that. All right. And the other thing is, and Steve, maybe you get to this as well, we have what's called a dry floodproofing certificate, which is now going to be needed for a lot of these municipalities. So this is something that's completed by the engineer of record. This is not something that's completed by floodproofing.com, supplier of these floodproofing systems. All right. So not only does it state that the system that's in place meets the ICC code and AIC code standards, but also that the walls are substantially sound enough to withstand impact from unknown debris and hydrostatic pressure. But we also have what's called an inspection and maintenance plan and an emergency operation plan. And Tyler, maybe you could hit on this too, because these are all three documents that we're going to need for flood insurance.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe just hit on the flood insurance aspect real quick.
Yeah. So if you know, like Owen said, if you have this flood cert, you also have a few other documents, one like a maintenance plan. You're eligible to potentially get a dry floodproofing credit on your flood insurance. Now, it's not like the vents and the wet floodproofing, it's applied instantly on your flood insurance. The dry credit, though, has to actually be reviewed by FEMA. It typically takes like 9 months to a year for it to be either approved or denied. But if it is approved, then there is potential to get a substantial upwards of, depending on how high you go, 40 to 50% discount on your flood insurance. But, you know, like Owen was talking about, the walls all have to, what they review is the products, the building, they have to be able to withstand the loads, and all that. And, you know, if it does qualify for all that, then, you know, there's potential for that credit as well.
Yeah, they're sticklers. So it's a fine-tuned written documentation. So that emergency operation
And
plan.
we help with that.
Yeah.
You know, if we do go down the avenue of working with you on a system or something.
Yeah, so that's establishes the chain of command and responsibilities, the procedure for notifying who's going to be going out deploying the system, where's the deployment stored, so on and so forth. Just referring to periodic drills and deployment time. Again, this is something, you know, we don't want to just sit the system in storage and forget about it, right? Think of it like a fire drill, call it a flood drill. Whoever's working on staff knows how to deploy these types of systems. But getting into the deployable flood barrier solutions, again, there's an array of different systems that are available. Just at a top level overview, one of the most traditional methods that business owners go with is a flood log application. All right, so at your opening, whether it be an entranceway or any windows that sit below that DFE level, you know, those need to be protected. These are systems that are going to be anchored into the walls with a Hilti anchor or maybe even just a snake anchor. Okay? But all that material that you see is removable. All right, so there's nothing visually that you will see other than a recessed anchor that sits within the wall. Everything is removable, and then before a flood event, the brackets, the logs, everything gets deployed, mid-span post, whatever.
Have you ever designed a system like that, 7 or 8 feet high?
Yes. Yeah, I think, you know, this is kind of a good example that you see right here. Each log is 1 feet tall. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's an 8-foot tall system. And then another 7-foot tall system. All right.
What is the material within the log?
It's typically aluminum. It's typically aluminum, and then you have gaskets on both the top and the bottom portion of the log. So as you stack the log one on top of the other, after you stack all the logs, there's a compression mechanism at the top that compresses the logs downward and then compresses the gasket to minimize any sort of seepage from getting in. Even your brackets that are,
Life of the gasket,
I'm sorry,
shelf life of the gasket in.
as long as you're taking care of it, typically 10 to 15 years. And that is not an expensive portion, so if it rips or tears, it's very easy to replace. Yeah.
Steel.
Another solution, and again, this is going to be a tougher solution for any sort of substantial improvement, but for a temporary solution to flood for business owners, expandable flood barriers. All right, so this fits in between a single door jam. It stands between a 32-inch and a 43-inch jam opening. So as long as you have 2.5 inches of jam depth, that barrier will expand outward in between the jam. And then almost like a pump mechanism or a tire pump, you pump the gasket to create the 3-sided seal. And we had to convert this into PDF, but on the right-hand side, there was an actual video demonstrating this barrier in action. So you can see the flood water behind the barrier and completely dry on the interior side. But the caveat with this one, again, it's only going to provide 28 inches of max flood protection on it. So those areas that are on Bay Avenue that you need a 4-foot, 5-foot, 6-foot tall system, you wouldn't be able to use this, right? Not enough protection.
Yeah, it's more like an off-the-shelf type of product. It will, most likely will not suffice for a substantial improvement. Dry flood proofing method. This is more for like nuisance flooding type of scenario.
Almost a proactive approach.
Yeah.
That would be a proactive approach. Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. Bob Davis from Davis Content. So that, the first one that you had with the aluminum logs,
Yes.
that's still relying on the structure behind it holding out the hydrostatic pressure, right? The channels are really just
Exactly.
doing nothing but holding the panels and the gaskets. So if you put this thing in, so you can't use any of this on any of the existing properties on Bay Avenue, that if you're doing above substantially damaged, whatever, right? Literally everyone would have to be knocked down and you'd have to have concrete and steel reinforced, whatever.
Well, yeah, keep in mind, as a design professional, there is an allowance in the International Building Code that allows a design methodology to be employed. So you can have an engineer to say, you know what, I'm going to design a system that's going to take this block wall, maybe even a CMU wall, I don't know, and I'm going to reinforce this, and I will guarantee it will withstand the hydrostatic pressure of 6 feet. That person who's an engineer has the ability to do that under the Uniform Construction Code right now. Of course, he's going to have to show the construction official in the municipality that he files the permit for that can be done, but that's not to say it's impossible. Have I ever seen it done? No.
No, it's not gonna be cost effective, there's no.
Yeah, that's right. It may cost him more, it may be cheaper to raise the building, because don't, I mean, the pouring of concrete walls with steel reinforced isn't as expensive as a lot of contractors
I mean,
think.
you say raise the building, but I feel like in most cases, where you're talking, where a building's slab at grade, you're not raising that building, you're knocking it down.
Well, there are some challenges, right? Because you have some buildings that are attached,
There
you're
might be a
not,
couple buildings that you're talking about, but most of them, you're not raising. And you're not keeping 6 feet of water out,
That's correct.
so.
Yeah, it is. So again, you know, we don't write the regulations.
No, yeah.
We only enforce the regulations, and I'd be the first to admit that it is a challenge. That's why Tyler and Owen with his products are awesome products, because I can't approve anything that's not listed, and these guys only work with stuff that's listed and approved devices. In other words, we can't have John down the block coming up with some sort of mechanism where he says,
I just wanted to make clear that, we're talking about these nice aluminum things with the gaskets and holding out pressure, but that's not gonna work on any of the
You know what
properties
this is
that are on the
about?
avenue. It's first you're building a brand new building with thick concrete walls and steel that's gonna hold out some ridiculous amount of hydrostatic pressure on a car running into, and,
Well, planning is important. So I'll give you an example. I had just met with Mr. Davies. He's an engineer. He recognizes that, look, there are things that we need to do here, and we're working with him. And so with his next project, we're gonna sit down and plan in advance to see what kind of solutions are available. So, can I raise this building? Is it possible? Or do I have to knock it down? Is it attached? What are the solutions available? Maybe the solution is, there is no solution. I'm just gonna keep it below 50%. We had, I'm not gonna mention where it was. We actually had an owner come to us and say, look, I'm gonna fix it up to maintain the fire rating. Do I have to rent this place out, or can I leave it empty? Because if he has to fix it up for an occupancy certificate, he's gonna exceed the 50%, and it's an attached structure. So can he leave it empty? Yeah, absolutely. If he maintains the fire.
is that what we want? That's not what we want, right? I mean, that's literally, that's where I think it's going, because, if it's never gonna be cost effective,
Let
then.
me pipe in here a minute, Kathy Shaw, CRS coordinator. We also have Bay Avenue, 151 properties, scattered site is a redevelopment area. So the borough is
Yeah.
looking, there's been, obviously it was designated before these new regulations came in. So currently, everything's being looked at with the redevelopment area, all the new floodplain, development requirements are in there. So, the world, I'm just gonna say this, I've been in a lot of places, the world doesn't end. We reinvent ourselves, and that's where we are right now. There's opportunities to be creative. Just because downtown Morristown, downtown Red Bank, downtown Keyport looks like it doesn't mean the downtown of the New Jersey Shore in the future will look like those places. So it's hard to wrap yourself around, but it's where it's a wall, it's a window of opportunity for some really dynamic things that are economic development drivers. I just want to put that out. And one last thing, we'll talk later about our floodplain platform that's available for all of our residents. But when you put your address in the platform that rides on the borough's website, you will get the most restrictive flood elevation site-specific to your property, residential or commercial. So that's already in place. There's no massaging it, it's right there. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, and we understand your concerns. I myself have been in the construction industry for a long, long time. And with the mayor and the borough really is interested in helping the businesses. So we have not yet come up with all the solutions. We understand that there are significant challenges, particularly on Bay Avenue for the businesses that own these buildings. Look, they spent money on buying these properties. Now they're faced with these regulations and they are coming into effect. And more importantly, they have been pulled in through the New Jersey legislature, through the Uniform Construction Code. Years ago, they were just going to local boards and getting everything waived and saying, no, you don't have to do that, you don't have to do that. That's not possible anymore, because the legislation said, no more. Everything gets adopted through the Uniform Construction Code, and you have to comply with these FEMA regulations. So the boroughs don't even have an option anymore. Even if they say, you know what, we don't care if we're CRS rated. It doesn't matter. The mayor can come to me tomorrow and say, I don't care about the CRS rating, we're giving it up. The Uniform Construction Code requires these solutions. There's no options anymore. And unfortunately, and I don't necessarily agree with all of it, it is punitive, but these are the regulations we're faced with enforcing, and I know the property owners are faced with having to comply.
The CRS rating is commercial and residential combined, or it's separate in somehow?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
I'm doing mostly residential, that's why I'm asking. I only
No,
have one
community-
property in this, and I was just,
community rating is an overall score for the town's ability to manage floodplain development, what processes you have in place, and it goes into planning, infill, drainage, the website, everything that was built on the website that you all are gonna look at after tonight is points, future for CRS. We've gotta educate the public on where the tools are, where the opportunities are. So CRS is a broad-based ranking that comes from probably 200 different planning, strategies, ordinances, rules. It's a collective total, and it has the ability to give every resident a discount. However, in the state of New Jersey and with FEMA, we're part of Region 2. Highlands has 300 National Violation Tracker designated properties on FEMA's list. Those people, if they are not removed from the list, will never be eligible for the CRS discounts. Everyone else will.
so I think, so on that list, right, there are a lot of properties, a bunch of new houses that I have built that are still on the substantially damaged list that are compliant, right? So is some of those 300 properties are a matter of record at this point that has to be corrected?
It's a matter of Kathy Shaw going in one by one
Right.
as someone comes in.
I don't listen to you, there's somebody
Do
dropped
you
the
think
ball
it's true?
before you.
I have tremendous, already, I have probably, I'm approaching 200 properties. There's 1,502 properties in our special flood hazard area. But the properties that I have a large list that I can take off. I have an elevation certificate, it was demolished, it was rebuilt, so I'm in the process. I wish it was as easy. I submitted 2 to FEMA, they threw 1 back, did not like the engineering 40-page, everything in there, elevation certificate, it did not meet their requirements for an engineered flood vent. I'm still vetting that one out.
Yes, so
But the one that I
requiring us to
submitted
put that paperwork in.
is removed. So we're putting information together. Unfortunately, a lot of elevation certificates that we have, they have errors on them and FEMA will not accept them. So we're trying to work through to get the errors. The floodplain platform that the borough's invested in has algorithms set in, so when a new project comes in, we run that elevation certificate through Forerunner. Forerunner provides us with, I like to call it a little report card. Here's issues. We give it back to the homeowner and say, work with your survey professional and let's get this cleaned up. So when we have them in, you know, Steve could address this. I mean, if there's one mistake on it,
The flood,
they'll take it. Doesn't count.
And sometimes that mistake is nothing but a dash, you know,
Well, we're working through it.
Something.
It's not an easy fix. It's not a, you know.
Well, I review all flood elevation certificates that come in. And I approve them and then they get uploaded to the Forerunner. And most always, I get
That's
accepted.
a question about, like, so I got a flood elevation certificate, Andrew did it when I bought my house, so that I didn't have to pay, you know, high insurance. So I'm the FE +5, but I also had a substantial damage letter for my property before I moved in after Sandy, even though there was no floodplain on it, as a FE +5. Would I be on the list? And then who do I send that flood elevation certificate to? I know it isn't on your database because it wasn't part of the building code submittal.
Can he see the NV violation, if he was the one on the public side?
Yeah, I think it's listed, but if you want, I'll give you my card, and if you want to call me, we can work through it. Every time somebody comes in, whether I'm not here every day, but the days that I am here, if somebody comes in, I check it, and, when Region 2 does visit us, which, you know, the mayor and representatives and County Joe Barris, who was here with our preliminary meeting, it should be soon. You know, my claim to fame is to be that, you know, we have a system. We are evaluating everything. We can't come in one day and go, oh my God, we have all these elevation certificates, we know where everything is. So it's a process, it's gonna take some time. I've written a CRS strategy, we keep changing it, we have to educate the people, we're gonna be going out to all the Highlands events. As soon as we get our marketing data, get people to go to the website, go to the floodplain platform, you know, it's a process, the whole thing's a process. But you can call me, my card is out there, I'm on the website, and I'll work with you on it. I get calls all the time.
Okay, but, so you review flood elevation certificates for projects that are submitted, but I have one done for my insurance, so you wouldn't have that in the file anywhere.
Unfortunately, I can't accept the FEMA certificate unless it's the most recent version. They can kick that out of the system. So if you have a 2015 elevation certificate date, that's not going to be accepted. Nor would I need to. You're not doing anything. If you're doing something, then I would need an elevation. Well, maybe I may not need an elevation. I do not require an elevation certificate because it costs money unless I need to somehow, for some reason, confirm an elevation. If you're installing an air conditioning system as a replacement, you're not going to have to get an elevation certificate. That's not required. You're only if you build an addition out of the back of the property and it turns out to be a substantial improvement, you're going to need an elevation certificate before you obtain a CO for that addition. But if you do a property that's not a substantial damaged property, so you can do up to 50%, and you would not need to comply with the floodplain regulations. It's just as if you were not even in the floodplain. Now that's not, that has nothing to do with the flood insurance. You may still be charged the flood insurance, but with respect to complying with the regulations, you would not have to comply with the regulations.
But I would need my house removed from that list of the 300 properties in order to get the CRS.
So you're saying that you are in fact on that list?
I don't know.
Well, you just work with me.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out.
You can work with Kathy, she'll help you out.
But I did was on the list of substantial damage letters that went out.
Many people were
Following
on that
some-
list, and we also received, maybe it was over 300, they were historical, increased claims compliance, people who received money from FEMA with their NFIP flood insurance, and they elevated, and, you know, there's nothing to come off the list, it's there. But if the property is repetitive loss, I'm just saying, that's where we get into a challenge, or the property is minus rated, low floor, you know, that's an issue. And in many cases, I track it and the property was elevated, demolished, new house, and those are my low-hanging fruit. I have to work with our floodplain administrator. I can't, on my own, send anything in, but we prepare all the paperwork. It's a process.
And our goal is to get the properties compliant.
Yeah, I'm more, now, with the business district, say someone has flood insurance and they're minus rated, are they not going to see any advantage with the CRS?
No,
They will not get a discount?
they are not eligible for any CRS benefits. Everyone else would be.
How would the insurance play on that,
One,
in that case?
the CRS discount?
No, not the CRS discount, with his insurance. Let's say he's on the national tracker, he's low floor. How does the insurance company look at that? Is that something that they're going to?
Being a negative rate property. Well, I mean now, so I guess we'll go on my side real quick, right? Good shift there, Steve. I'm gonna do some slides real quick. I've been waiting. All right, so real quick, we'll just go through a little bit on the insurance stuff. So high overview of NFIP, we don't really need to go over that. So right now, we just went through a reform, risk rating 2.0. You may have gotten letters about it and everything like that. Pre-risk rating 2.0, now we call it risk rating 1.0. So I just kind of want to go over the differences, but The timetable, it's official now, as of 22. All renewals started to get phased into risk rating 2.0. So if you have an existing flood insurance policy, you would have already seen some changes on your flood insurance with risk rating 2.0 if you renewed after 22. And if you're getting a new policy, or if you got a new policy since 2021, you would have already gone under risk rating 2.0's rates. But what they're doing now is they're phasing everybody into their new FEMA full risk rate under risk rating 2.0. So previously, just to give you an idea of what it was before, and then we'll go to what it is now. Previously, a big driver, or the main driver of the flood insurance rate was the elevation difference. So the rated floor level compared to the BFE, you do the math on that, so say it's at 8, the floor level, BFE is at 8, that'd be considered a 0. Elevation difference back 3 years ago, a 0 paid around $900 to $1,200 a year for $250,000 on a residential structure. And that was whether you were in Wildwood, New Jersey, or here, or in Mississippi. If you were a crawl space 0, primary residence, so those things were the same, you paid the same amount of money because of that elevation difference being the sole pretty much driver of the premiums. Now, with risk rating 2.0, it's a much more detailed rating engine. So now the elevation certificate is no longer required, but we just went all through why it's important and everything. It's still important on the building side. That's completely separate than the flood insurance side, right? On the flood insurance side, pre-risk rating 2.0, if you were a post-firm building, meaning you were built when there was a flood insurance rate map in effect, you were required to have an elevation certificate. No longer, though, is it required, but it can still benefit your rate, depending on the elevations that FEMA has on their back end. So they could have a lower elevation than what it actually is, and then the elevation certificate will reduce the insurance. But now, instead of just going off of elevation difference, they're looking at ground elevation, they're looking at replacement costs of the building. A lot of people ask, why does replacement cost matter? Because there's a maximum coverage limit that you can get, $250,000 in building for a residential structure, $500,000 for commercial. So a lot of people ask, why does it matter what the house costs to replace when we have the same amount of coverage? The reason why is there's a much greater likelihood that a higher value home is going to fully exhaust that full coverage limit. So $1 million house is most likely going to use $250,000 a lot quicker than a $250,000 house. So replacement cost now matters a lot more, or matters, whereas before it didn't even matter. And then some other things they're looking at, like flood types, some historical data, the construction type, distance of flooding, source of flooding, and like I said, type of flooding. So it's now a lot more property specific. Previously, we would do these outreaches. I've been doing these since I started, 11, 12 years ago. And you could just show me an elevation chart, and I could tell you right off the top of my head, what you should be paying on your premiums. Now, I can't do that. I can kind of give you a range depending on the area that I'm in. If I quoted this area a lot, I most likely can give you a range. But now, like I said, it's much more property specific to where I have to work with the quotable system, because all the rates are done on the back end of these systems. And they're using all this technology from different CAT modelers, stuff that's well known in the insurance industry. And just to give you a comparison, auto insurance, and I use these just because everybody has, most likely went through your whole life paying homeowners and auto insurance, right? Predominantly auto insurance. Auto insurance is not just looking at your driving history, it's looking at hundreds of other factors: age, how many cars are in the area, types, type of area, type of vehicle, all that stuff. So the NFIP is really trying to somewhat come in line with the rest of the industry, using big data, which everybody here, hears all the time how important data is, right? And we're using that to determine rates. So to go back to Steve's original question about the elevation, technically, if it's a lower elevation, they should be paying more on their flood insurance. but they may not be, depending on where the property is located, and all these other factors that I kind of just went over. I have to like look at the case to be able to tell. But previously, the risk rating 2.0, no doubt that if you were at a lower elevation, you were paying more on your flood insurance. And technically, with risk rating 2.0, you should be paying more if you're at a lower elevation. But it's case by case, so there are instances where it may not be more, and a lot of times, it is. But that's I guess long and short of it.
And I can just add in there that being here now, 12 months, I've had people come in and they've been like on Beach Boulevard, and I've had one person, I usually ask people, I talked to Tyler about it sometimes too, to get a point of reference, well, what's your flood insurance? Same block, houses way, one is about $500 and the other is $3,700.
Yeah.
So they're on the same block. So the variables have become, unfortunately, last year I went to the New Jersey Conference or Association of Floodplain Managers, and this risk 2.0 was all the talk. And it's like, there's a lot of variables now. It's changing, it's morphing. So I'm like, great, because when I first entered the dance floor, I was all about elevation certificate. We'll get an elevation certificate, we're gonna get the cheapest insurance, we're gonna have good records, we're gonna get certified for CRS. And I think I was blown out of the water the first 30 days I was there, so now it's like we've gotta regroup. But, so it's going through a lot of changes. I know it's stressful when you live in a town and you've invested in a town, and I get people calling me all the time, realtors, investing. Everybody's very excited about Highlands. It's, I think, a fabulous place, but this is a challenging time, and we're just gonna have to keep working through it with the regulations that we have.
Yeah, I wanted to add real quick. So on the risk rating 2.0, if you are currently paying flood insurance, and risk rating 2.0 says that your rate should be higher than what you've always paid, you'll be put on a glide path where you're going to increase around 15 to 18% a year until you hit whatever that new full risk premium is. And as per the Clear Communication Act at FEMA, you can actually see that number on your declaration page now. If you go to your declaration page on your insurance, you'll see it'll say FEMA full risk premium on there. Whatever that number is, because that number that was discounted and everything, the discount is continuous coverage. So, for example, if you were paying $500 and it says now you should be paying $2,000, you would have gone up in 22, you would have gone up in 23. Now let's just say you're at $1,300. But what you'll see is that $3,000 or whatever the example number I use, the $3,000 number will be the full risk premium, and that's where you're going to eventually, gradually increase to.
If we had an elevation certificate associated with our risk rating 1, did it automatically transfer over to risk rating 2?
Yeah, and it should if you're still with the same agent and everything.
Okay.
Yeah. If you switch though, we got a new policy.
They switched. I didn't switch, but I think the agency got switched. Someone bought someone else out or something.
Are you still with the same carrier?
It's NFIP.
Yeah, but there's Write Your Own carriers.
That's right.
Right. So it hasn't always been Write Flood.
I think it might have been someone
It
else.
might have. So I don't know. They might not have. I have to look at it. They may or may not have it. I mean, it depends. If you switch carriers and didn't resubmit that elevation cert, and maybe that agent sold his agency to another guy, he might not have known to submit it. I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah, it happened to me. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can always submit it.
Yeah, my rate went up $100 from $500 to $600. but-
Well, I'll be honest, you're going to increase, most likely. Just from, back to where I was saying, I can kind of give you a somewhat estimate. People that were very great, they were compliant, everything like that, like you are, you were paying the top rate, $500, $600, $700 a year. But all these ones that are coastal that are like that, I've seen, for the most part, they're increasing.
So even if they're
Yes.
plus rating.
Yes.
So are there, I'm assuming that there are significant differences in the cost for a house elevated or compliant versus a house not sitting below?
Not so much anymore. It depends on all those other factors. Previously, yes, and really it should be that way, but it's different now, unfortunately.
That might just answer my question there.
I just had one to say, it was explained to me when I went to the conference, New Jersey Association of Floodplain, that it was like an equalization program that the federal government looked at, because there were disparities, so they were trying to equalize, and I guess from what you're saying, which I didn't get there, is industry standard for homeowners and the like, they're trying to.
Well, like, the NFIP is $25 billion in debt to the US Treasury. So, you know, that tells me that they're not running the program. They haven't run the program right. If that was a private insurance company, they'd be out of business, right? So, private insurance companies, like homeowners and auto companies, have to do this stuff, have to run all these numbers and everything, so that, you know, at the end of the day, insurance companies are casinos. Like, they want to bring in more than they pay out. Now, the government isn't a private company. Their job's not to make money, but also it is supposed to be self-sufficient. And, you know, unfortunately, it hasn't been running that way, and that kind of triggered some of these changes.
That's every branch of the government.
Okay.
So the NFIP kind of relies on, or still relies on under risk rating 2.0, the FEMA flood maps, right?
Yes.
So when DEP now says that we have to build or pay attention to base flood plus 5, does that mean FEMA's gonna go through another round of trying to raise that base flood elevation on the?
No, it shouldn't have to do
FEMA
anything.
maps? That'll
It
impact-
won't have anything to do with the insurance. That's a building code standard.
The only thing that might do is, because it's 5 feet above what FEMA requires, is it might make your CRS, make it more CRS place the community for compliant for.
Right. So it might affect the discount.
It might affect,
Which is
you might
better.
actually end up with a discount community-wide because of it. Even if you don't have to do it for FEMA purposes.
It won't affect your individual rate. It may affect the CRS class, which will then give you maybe a bigger discount.
Right, and I do remember, I guess, under the old system with the NFIP, like you mentioned, 0 base flood
Yep.
plus 0, base flood plus 1, your
Yeah,
rate went down a little
yeah.
bit, 2 went down a little
Yeah.
more, after 3
Yeah.
it didn't really matter.
Right. Yeah.
Originally, they said it would, when we first started one of the meetings after Sandy, they were saying there should be discounts for 1, 2, and 3, but then
Yeah.
it seemed like there was really nothing.
Yeah, it used to, risk rate 1.0, we used to like top down right around that 3 mark.
And then with the flood events, you got an extra credit. And that's not the case anymore.
What is the impact of this, the Army Corps project on the community rating system and floodproofing in town?
You want to answer that?
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this from the Uniform Construction Code perspective, 0. Because you still got to comply with the Uniform Construction Code. From a CRS rating,
First of all, we don't have one, we're in the process.
good point to highlight.
Well, I'm sorry, but I mean, this is my life every day, I'm desperately trying to get it. I mean, I did get it once in the 90s, so we're gonna get it again, we know we're gonna get it again. But, you know, it may have some overall impact, but, it's kind of like talking about the +5, it's not here. So what I'd like to focus on with Highlands as a dynamic community is let's work with what we have, that's reality right with us now, and that will arm us to be stronger should we get another mandate that we have to do.
And I'm assuming it has no impact on insurance either, right?
Right.
So that's the goal of getting the CRS rating, because it's not just having a number, it's the discount that people get.
But if the town doesn't look to funding or going in with the wall project, does that affect the rating?
Well, there's, what is there of numbers, there's an enormous amount of things that the town can do, everything of which has a cost. Bringing on Kathy Shaw as a CRS coordinator has a cost. Hiring a certified floodplain manager has a cost. So the question is, how much does the town want to pay to get this rating? Some are cheap, some are not so much. So we look at with the county, Joe Barris, and with the town, we focus on areas, what can we achieve? What are the things that we can do that don't cost a lot of money? little things like this, outreach, marketing, the website. So if you go onto the construction website, I have a whole page and links on the construction side about floodplain management and the construction aspect of things. On the CRS side, same thing, on the OEM side. So there's a lot of things we can do that are relatively inexpensive. There are some things that are very expensive. So we kind of go, we pick and choose. We pick the things that we can do that doesn't have a huge cost, and we get as many points as possible. That's the goal. It's a tremendous amount of information. Even I didn't know how much, because in some of the other towns I work with engineers, they do the CRS side. With Kathy, I'm directly involved with the CRS. The amount of information that has to be collected is incredible. The work is just incredible. But those are the things we need to do to get those numbers. So we're getting the best number. The lowest number we get is the highest insurance discount we get.
With a flood project complete, would all of the regulations on individual flood preparedness and preparation change?
I could probably answer some of that. That flood project, the height would be around elevation 14. It would not meet the BFE plus 3 feet standard that FEMA typically requires. The Army Corps has an option to use a lower freeboard amount, but they require it to have a 90% conditional non-exceedance. It's a statistical analysis they do. It won't meet that. It has to be the 100-year, say, which might be 11 in a lot of the areas, maybe a little higher with the weighting, but it won't meet the elevation requirements that FEMA has for it to become accredited as eliminating the need for flood insurance or meeting the floodplain ordinances.
And it would also not meet the requirements of the Uniform Construction Code because it's not attached to the building. It has to be part of the structure itself in order to be.
So you had to, if you did the Army Corps project, you'd still have to do all of your individual work on buildings.
Kind of like all the areas in Fort Monmouth with the hurricane thing.
Yeah. If you could build a complete barrier around the building, it wouldn't matter because it's not attached to the building. Because the Uniform Construction Code regulates the building, and it's the building that has to comply, not the ancillary or supplemental barriers that are placed in other areas.
I just want to say, we gave a presentation in April about CRS, the governing body, and it's on YouTube, you could see it. And one of the things that came up with a lot of people coming into the office is, well, I don't think we really want CRS because we don't want to comply. They feel like if we don't comply with this, and my point that I made in that presentation is that it's got to be done no matter what. So not to try to get CRS credit, that makes a lot of sense because you've got to do it anyway. So why not see if you can capture some benefits for your residents, and property owners across the board.
Yeah, prior to 2015, it didn't matter. Once the 2015 ICOs were adopted, the legislature says you have to comply. And all those planning boards are out. They can no longer waive these rules. These are now mandatory rules, you gotta comply. So now, where years ago it benefited not being CRS rated, maybe, because then the town don't have to pay all this money, and the town doesn't have to take all the heat from the businesses saying that they can't comply. Now they have to comply, it's compulsory. And that's what we're faced with. And so, in summary with the businesses, I know we spent a lot, there might be some questions on residential, but we spent a lot of time on businesses. The bottom line is we are working with the community leaders, the mayor and council, to come up with innovative solutions that include a number of aspects outside of the construction requirements. Whether, the entire Bay Area is under a redevelopment zone, we're looking for creative ways, maybe, and I can't speak on behalf of the town, but there are many things that they can implement that would maybe make it beneficial for the owners of the property. Maybe you couldn't build a 2-story, don't take this for heart, but maybe you couldn't build anything more than a 2-story, but now, you're gonna have to raise it, we'll give you the extra story. So these are the options that we're looking at to give some sort of benefit, or the town, actually, the mayor and the communities are saying, what is it that we can do for the community? So those are things we are exploring that are in the upcoming months that we're gonna look at that can get you to that point where you can say, you know what, all right, it's worth raising that level, because you will get to that level, and you'll get a building that's more productive for the owner of the property, rather than just have an area that's gonna get stuck with the 10-year look back and the 50%, because he'll never be able to develop that property to anything beyond 50%. He'll be there forever. So he'll wait 3 years for that for maybe $10,000 to evaporate, and then he has $10,000 to fix the building.
I had a question about that 50% rule, and right in line with what you just said there. Is the 50%, is it right for the project that you're doing, or is it over time?
It's 10 years.
Cumulative over time?
If you put an air conditioning system, that gets calculated and added to the aggregate.
That would be the air conditioning system if it was put below BFE.
It doesn't matter. Whatever you do, put a
Even if
roof,
it's on the roof.
unless it's exempt under the FEMA regs. If it's exempt, you don't have to include those costs. And those costs are listed on the floodplain development permit. But if they are, all those costs are entered into Forerunner, and we do track it. And that's what Kathy's actually involved with now, with several hundred properties. She's going back 10 years and putting all these in. We're coming up with a lot of properties that are already substantially damaged. So if they come in for so much as a renovation, they have to raise the house.
And just to be on the upbeat for Bay Avenue, that it's a redevelopment area, it's already designated, it's going through some, updates, because we have a new floodplain regulation that came in June of '22. Under the state of New Jersey, our state, there are incentives for investors and developers in redevelopment areas. So I know myself, and I've been talking with the mayor, NJ Business Action Center and EDA, NJ EDA. We need to be talking. The Jersey Shore, our whole Jersey Shore, the state of New Jersey, is going to be challenged with complying with all of these regulations and the model ordinance that we have. So there's got to be a financial incentive scheme that goes with it. So it's already out there. It probably needs to be promoted a little bit for anybody who's investing in a redevelopment area. And, this is a special flood hazard area. And, I want to be talking that up a little bit, because it's going to be a tremendous challenge for the entire Jersey Shore, not just islanders, Seabright, everywhere, because it's going to be clicking.
Did you want to add anything on that, Ed?
Just one clarification for folks that might not know. The building department at the time of Sandy sent one of those 50% damaged letter to every single property in Lower Islands. If you were not on 36, you got the letter. Didn't matter if you flooded or not. So there were some areas like Bayside Drive and Shore Drive that they did not flood, but they still got the letter. So that's another pile of mess that Kathy is going through, because we said that someone was damaged, but they didn't have any property damage at all. To Mike Cannon's comment, yes, there are, and Bob brought it up as well, there are a considerable amount of properties that are on that violations tracker that don't exist anymore, and they've been replaced by new homes.
So do we have,
Because you can't really take into consideration like Paradise Park Trailer Park and that construction, and then all of the one-floor bungalows and that construction. You can't compare it to a 2- or 3-story house that is built above the floodplain. You can't, it's not even apples
So
to apples to Cadillacs.
there's paperwork somewhere that was not submitted, I take it, on some of these properties, like like new homes, I think at least 2 or 3 of the new homes that I built, they're, we sent in our flood vent things and our elevation certificate, and they're, all flood compliant, and they're still listed as substantially damaged, so that's what you're working on. There's paperwork somewhere that goes with that that you're trying to.
The only substantially damaged homes that we have are the list that we received from FEMA Region 2. So if somebody got a letter, they might have gotten, like I said before, they call it historical increased claims compliance funds from NFIP. They complied. What I'm working on is that active list. And I'm trying to remove as many as I can. And it's a process. We've had street names be changed, the block and lots are there, they're always there, but you gotta do some forensic stuff to find it. You know, it was a bungalow, now it's a $1.2 million home that's elevated. It was maybe elevated in 2018, now we have 2022 maps. So it's an ongoing process, and we've got quantifiable activities that we're doing, and that's what I'm hoping that FEMA Region 2 is gonna say, wow, you have a process for it, and that Highlands is gonna benefit from all that, as many people as possible.
Like I told you before, if you come across those, I know there's a couple of those, the new homes that I built. If you come across them and you're missing paperwork, feel free to call me, and
I'll get
we'll
your
do
number.
anything I can to help you.
Great, thank you.
Are there any questions on residential homes?
Yeah, I've got an actual question because my name's Robert Kraft. I just recently bought a house in town. What?
It's being recorded, so you look my.
Oh, okay, this one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hey, my name's Robert Kraft. I recently bought a house here in town, and I want to know where I can find the information on what I have to do with it, if it's compliant or if it's not. Half the houses on my block are raised, half of them aren't. So is it like on a website where I can find out what the next step, for myself? It's been a rental property for like a long time. My wife and I intend on living there, so I want to see what I can and can't do, or should, or have to do.
Yeah, what you could do is, you could start, if you can get the link.
Okay.
You can, on the public side of Forerunner platform, you can type in your address.
Okay, is it in the
It's
paperwork?
the
Yes.
handout.
Okay,
It's
that's
a handout.
Okay,
And you can call me, I can guide you through it if you're not.
Yeah, you can start by looking at your property information, it'll tell you the floodplain that you're in.
right, no, that's the information that I wanna,
It'll also tell you the value, the improved value of your house.
Okay,
If you need specific information, you can always reach out for me, my business cards are out there.
Okay.
And we can help you out along with more specific information. We can do a 10-year look back on the property, see what's been done on the property. And if you think that the property value is too low, which it probably is, you can always hire an appraiser to get that increased.
all right, like I said,
So-
go ahead.
Yeah, so the cost of raising it, of course, is irrelevant, because you're gonna raise it, you're gonna make it compliant, so you don't have to worry about substantial.
Right.
So if the cost of raising it exceeds the 50% of the improved value, it's not a concern for you, because you want to make the house compliant.
Right.
So, if you start with the website, it will tell you, do you have any elevation certificates on the property?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. The unique thing about the Forerunner is, if you look at the yellow dots, that is an elevation certificate on another property.
Okay,
I think you could see elevation certificates on the public side. If not, we can look at it.
okay,
You can estimate where your design flood elevation is above grade. All
Right.
you have to do is subtract the adjacent grade,
Mhm.
say it's at elevation 5,
right,
and if you're at elevation 9 as your design flood elevation, that's 4 feet. Your 4 feet is your elevation. So if your lower floor is above 4 feet, you're compliant.
okay.
Of course, you would need the
Yeah, no, that's
elevation
what,
certificate.
like I said, that's what I wanna try to find out.
See if you have one. If you don't, we may even have one on the property already. Maybe, depends on how old. If we don't have
Well,
one,
the house is like 120 years old.
well, there may be one filed in our file.
Okay,
We can also file an Oprah request and see if we can pull out the original files, which we have stored in archive, and see if there's any documents in that. But if there's been no substantial work done on the property,
No,
there's
it's-
probably nothing.
yeah, it's been sitting there, so,
Is your goal to raise it?
I really don't know, depends on whether I have to or whether I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you don't have to if you don't do anything to it. Or you do less than 50%.
See, again, that's where I want to know where I can find that information, to see what I can and can't do, or if I have to raise it to do, you know what I mean?
So what we can do is reach out to Kathy, she'll do a 10-year look back for you.
Okay.
See what kind of work was done on the property in the past. Maybe nothing.
No, like I
Maybe just
said,
air conditioners.
yeah, it looks like nothing's been done. I'm a retired carpenter, I pretty much know what buildings looks like, and yeah, it's.
And then we can give you an idea of what was done, how much is already in the file,
Right.
and then you have the option of increasing the value. We already had, like I said, Mr. Davies had a property, he got his value up from what was it, 240, doubled it? Which you can do,
Okay,
and
like,
I will accept it, no problem.
yeah, like I said, I just wanna know where to look, so they definitely answered that question for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm looking to lift my house, hopefully within the next year, and
You
I'm
want,
not,
the clerk is,
I have to go up there.
what, you don't want to speak in public?
Nobody else had to go up. Andrea, by the way. I'm down, on Second Street. So I'm looking to lift my house. I work for an architect. I don't have my license yet, but I'm working on it. But he doesn't do construction. We're more commercial. So he's kind of trying to help me out in terms of the construction of the foundation and all that. I'm wondering, do I have to go through you first and get you to approve my plans before I send them to
No. No,
Middletown, or?
you don't send it to Middletown anymore.
Okay,
Middletown's no
so,
longer involved in Highlands. Everything goes to this construction office.
okay,
Everything is reviewed, floodplain, construction, zoning, everything's viewed in this office.
okay, so I should do that first?
You have your
That'll
architect,
take-
do you live in the home?
Yes,
You said, single family home?
yes,
Do you know which flood zone you're in?
AE 11, so 12, I'm raising it to 12.
Okay. Are you a coastal, Ed, you know?
What?
No.
No, Second Street.
What's your address?
So,
67 Second Street.
so you can have, so you can have your architect
Mm-hmm.
draft the plans?
Well, I drafted the plans.
You
He'll
draft
stamp
the
it.
plans, you can stamp them, and then submit it along with your construction permit.
Okay,
And then we review them and we release them
okay,
back to you. If there's any issues, we'll let you know
okay.
what they are.
All right. I know that before we were going over to Middletown, so I knew it was a little screwy.
You gotta be careful, because there are some houses that
Last
are in
year?
coastal zones.
So not that long ago.
So they would only be.
It's an old map. We had one come across last week. It was an old map and it hit a coastal area.
But so it'd have to be one house or two houses?
The only reason why I asked
It
is
would
because
have to be the
coastal
second-
areas, you can't design your own plans.
Right, so, but it would have to be the second house from the water, Steve, in order to go.
I don't know, I know that well.
I do, I know every.
When you start saying second house,
You give me a
next to
street,
the ice
I
cream
can give you,
shop.
I can give you you know, it's, yeah, anything on Second Street is definitely AE. It would have to be a second house from the water.
Oh,
I mean,
okay, she's
coastal.
at the, all right.
The only coastal line we have comes down
I back
Seadrift.
up to
Starts at
Shore.
Seadrift, comes down Seadrift and around the corner. and
So,
then ends.
so you would submit the plans sealed, if you're gonna get the architect drafted, or you're gonna draft them, have them sealed. submit.
Well, I mean, it's my boss, so he's just.
So you're essentially gonna order him to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Coastal line, yeah.
And if there's any questions, you can always call us. Alicia's great, she's our technical assistant, she can help you, and if she needs to, if you need to talk to me, she'll reach out for me, and I'll call you back.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is there
Only-
any other questions?
I had a question about, what you guys consider flood-resistant materials. And what counts for that. I've had different builders around the whole, Bayshore area kind of have different opinions on what flood-resistant materials are.
Well, so FEMA publishes a bulletin, it's FEMA TV2. Sorry.
Too soft-spoken, Andrew.
So the question was materials below the design flood elevation. So FEMA publishes a bulletin, FEMA TV2. If you type in FEMA TB, Technical Bulletin 2, it will come up on any search engine. It's not long, I think it's only 30 pages, something like that. But the bulk of it is really on only a handful of pages. It's a chart that lists the materials. That's 5 classes. 3 classes are not permitted, 2 are. And you just have to go down the chart and go across to see what's permitted and what's not. Essentially, anything 7 inches is permitted, tile, stone, brick, concrete, anything that's natural wood. Generally not permitted. The issue is that FEMA was testing this material back in 2010 and they stopped. So the question was, it's gotta be flood resistant.
I believe that.
And there's a definition for that in FEMA
This
TD2.
definition says it has to be able to withstand being flooded and only sustain cosmetic damage.
Correct. So, the problem generally we come into with is stairs. So stairs are generally glued with standard glue, steel staples. They are not approved, even if it has ipe wood, white oak, and there's a couple of other exotic woods I've come across. They're not approved because they can't withstand a flood. Once the water hits the wood, it goes right through the wood, it hits the steel, and it rusts and it falls apart. If I have come across once a set of stairs that was actually rated for below floodplain use. And we've had developers in Highlands, when I first came here, that had completely had to rip out the lower levels and redo it at a cost of close to $100 grand because he used non-compliant materials. And I hate to see that happen because I don't want to do that to builders, but it's got to be floodplain compliant. Dense glass, not drywall. PVC, not regular wood. You can use treated wood for stairs, or if you're going to use an exotic wood like ipe or a white oak or some other wood that APA allows, or there's also the National Forest Service that has a whole bunch of pamphlets on the types of wood that's approved. It's got to be designed and constructed in accordance with FEMA. What that is, I can't tell you because there's really no publication on it. So I'll tell you what I do, and a lot of floodplain, maybe you can answer on what you would do. I would require the design professional to give me a letter saying that it's meeting this product along with whatever it's made of is meeting the definition spelled out by FEMA and FEMA TB2. If he certifies that, and some architects will certify that, some will not, I can accept that under the Uniform Construction Code. But some architects are hesitant because they don't understand it. Unfortunately, there's got to be more testing on materials than what's approved because that is a.
I would say my argument was, I mean, going forward for sure I'll use whatever material you say, but my argument would be if you drive up and down Highlands, there's hundreds of homes that have been lifted that their first floors were yellow pine or oak or poplar or whatever they were, and their stairs were underwater. And there's not a set that was replaced when the homes were lifted, they were refinished. I know, so when you look at the interpretation of the definition is that if it could go underwater and sustain only cosmetic damage, yeah, it happened a lot of times, and it only sustained cosmetic damage. So, prior to you, and I know this was not you, but other building inspectors were, they were saying it was okay to waterproof, whatever the steps, because everybody wants their steps to match, obviously, their floor, whatever, and,
Unfortunately,
my argument would be, that, they did go underwater. And more than once, several times, before the homes are lifted, and they're still in the homes, but certainly going forward, whatever you say.
It's not, it's easy to follow today because the materials are readily available. The dense glass is readily
No,
available.
we've been doing, we've done that dense glass since the first house I lived in after Sandy. I was the first guy, using underground wire, because I went to all the FEMA meetings and knew it was going to be required, and, I've only used dense glass, and I've only used pressure treated material. But the one thing we were doing was, exterior, we were using coating the stairs, whatever, and, there were solid stairs, and, like, to me, it was interpretation, I guess, between a couple of building inspectors, the definition of, being able to go underwater, withstand only cosmetic damage. That's what has happened.
Well, that's why you can get a design professional to certify it.
Yeah, I did. I provided you a letter.
And coatings generally.
Going forward, going forward, I don't want to.
Tyler, does that make a difference on the insurance side?
No.
I will.
It just came, so it's not rated on that floor level, it came in finished material, but not what type of material, just unfinished or finished.
Okay.
Just one shout out to all of you is highlandsborough.org, the website, you go to flood protection information. All these technical bulletins, there are hot links right on there.
Yeah.
So you go there for insurance, we've built everything into that floodplain protection information
Yeah.
for a quick reference.
I've noticed that, it's a good resource too.
Good.
There's a lot of information there, you know, it takes a lot of reading, and it is complicated, I would admit. You know, I deal with it every day, sometimes it gets complicated for me. And we do enforce the rules equally, so I don't tell one building, you can't use this, we try to be consistent with all the decisions we make.
I understand.
And as design professionals, you have, well, even the design professionals, I tell them all the time, they don't understand that. Under that design methodology allowance, you can essentially design, if you put your seal to it, pretty much anything you want, but you're putting your seal to it.
Yeah, there's definitely some interpretation of whatever, and what they're, and they should be, where they have to be comfortable that it meets the interpretation, but, I think there is some little leeway there.
Is there any other questions or concerns or
Anything else?
anybody want to add anything? Nobody got tomatoes with them, do they? They don't want to throw tomatoes.
Well, I have
Very
one quick question, actually. So you're talking about if we complete compliance with this thing, and that there's a savings. Like, has there been an estimate of like obviously we have some idea of a lot of these homes that have been raised, well, how many might be, and if we reach some level, do we know what the savings might be, like percentage wise, or like an estimate?
Yeah.
If we get X amount of points, we get X amount of 5% off. If we do more points, 10%, 20%, 25%.
Yeah, I can tell you in Manasquan,
Like, that's what I was asking, like in other towns where
I think it's 25%.
25%.
Middletown, I think, is an 8, maybe. No, Monmouth Beach, we're an 8, and it's 15%.
Okay, that's what I was interested
Margate,
in.
Barrier Island, outside of Atlantic City, 25%.
And what are they rated?
They got 25% discount.
Yeah, what's their
They're,
CRS rating?
It's the same.
5?
I think that's what you said.
So it's a substantial amount, when you talk about the number of homes. I was just trying to think like what
If
we're
it
going
was
through to
just
get to
the
that.
homes, that would be such a quantifiable thing. I have to tell you, I was just sharing, it's called.
Yeah, he was talking about all the other things that.
A quick link, and it's 14 pages of regulations, whether it's transporting fill, it's your regulations for drainage. The variables are a huge gambit. It's not just the elevations of the homes for getting the discount. So we're working on all of them.
It's part of it, but
Right.
Dennis,
Just a reminder, the CRS manual that we use to follow and do the CRS program is over 600 pages long. And it's like a giant board game. And there's multiplier factors if you do certain things. It is an incredibly complex program that requires documentation. That's why you're asked to sign in tonight. Kathy has to document that people were able to sign in and that they've been coming to visit, they've attended these kind of seminars to get points. The brochures I brought up from Freehold tonight, you get brochures when you go out to a meeting in town, or if you're doing some sort of outreach at one of your festivals here, you get points for that too. The county has points behind the scenes connecting to our library system with all of our archives and documents, finding all the floodplain maps. We've done a lot since Sandy at the county to get towns higher into the system. We started off with only 8 towns in the program in the county, now we have 16 towns in the program. Overall savings about $2 million a year for policyholders by increasing not just the number of towns in the program, but towns that have actually increased their own ratings in the system thanks to our assistance in our program. It's only gotten better. It's gotten great relationship between the county and the towns that are in the system. My involvement with the New Jersey Floodplain Management Association, working with these guys on projects, it just accumulates. And so with the increase in the cost of flood insurance, it becomes even more imperative to get into the CRS program to get to a discount for those people who have policies.
yeah, and special thanks to Joe, because Joe is considered an expert, so we're all very lucky to have him.
They're the experts. I'm class now. It's
He's a
okay.
great help to all the other
Pass it along. It's all good stuff.
Can you the microphone, please?
Okay, is anybody else dare to take the microphone? We want to thank the mayor and Joe especially for coming here, everybody for showing up. We appreciate it. Your input is important to us. This is new to us, this community, and with everybody's input, we can make a difference. It's just gonna take everyone's involvement, because we just enforce the regulations. We don't write them, and it's your homes that we're trying to improve, and we're trying to get you the best discounts that we can get you while we're enforcing the regulations. Because in the end, those properties that are raised do become more valuable. And personally, I think Highlands really is a diamond in the rough. And once you start getting these builders starting to invest this money into these properties, you're gonna see the property values go up even higher than they have.
It has a great future, despite climate changes and sea level, it's got a great future, but you've got to stay this path because you want to have a community in the future. If you don't do anything, you're always going to be dealing with, you're always going to be stuck in a place and time, and you'll never advance. This is to get you to the next level so you are a thriving community. And it's going to be, it really is a unique place in the world here. And thanks to leadership for doing this. You can't have this without the borough's leadership taking charge of this problem and actually getting people like Kathy here and Steve here and getting this project off the ground. So,
I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. If you want to replay it all and relive it all again, YouTube channel, because it'll be posted to YouTube tomorrow.
And please, when you leave, there's a handout out there. It's a great thing to just look over all the links to NFIP, to the Highlands website, Timber Runner for the floodplain platform. Grab that with you, and we'll be seeing you all at the events from probably next month on. We'll be there.